They say the veil between worlds is thinnest at night. It's a time when darkness breathes and shadows come alive. But some boundaries, some thresholds, should never be crossed. Tonight, we delve into the chilling story of a ritual that must never ever be performed after 3:33 a.m. The tale serves as a stark warning to those who dare to meddle with forces beyond their comprehension. For centuries, secret societies and occult practitioners have whispered warnings in hushed tones about performing certain rituals after a very specific time. But why 3:33 a.m.? Known by some as the witching hour or the devil's hour, it is said that at this exact moment, the fabric of reality is at its most fragile. The forces you try to summon, the entities you attempt to contact, they become unpredictable, malevolent, and dangerously powerful. It's a moment when the gateway doesn't just open, it shatters. And what comes through is not what you called, but what was waiting to be released. Tonight, you'll hear the terrifying account of what happens when morbid curiosity outweighs ancient caution. This isn't just a story. It's a testament to the horrors that await in the suffocating silence of the early morning. Meet Jason, a college student whose fascination with the supernatural wasn't just a hobby, it was an obsession. He spent his nights poring over forgotten folklore and his weekends exploring reputedly haunted locations. His dorm room looked less like a student-esque living space and more like a museum of the macabre filled with strange artifacts and dusty tomes. One rainy evening, while browsing a shadowy corner of an old bookstore, he stumbled upon a leather-bound grimoire. Its pages were brittle, filled with spidery script and unsettling diagrams. Among the various incantations, one ritual caught his eye, the invocation of the Silent Watcher. The instructions were meticulous, detailing the need for specific candles, herbs, and a circle drawn with salt and ash. But at the very end of the incantation, written in a blood-red ink that seemed to pulse under the dim light, was a stark warning. Under no circumstances perform this rite after the 3rd hour and 33rd minute of the morning. For anyone else, this would have been a clear deterrent. But for Jason, it was a challenge. He saw it not as a warning, but as a test of his courage. He believed the forbidden knowledge was the most potent, and the warning was merely a gatekeeper's bluff to ward off the unworthy. That night, as the moon cast long skeletal shadows through his window, Jason prepared. He meticulously drew the symbols on his floor, lit the black candles, and placed a silver mirror at the center of the circle. He watched the clock on his wall, its ticking echoing the frantic beat of his own heart. 3:30, 3:31, 3:32. At exactly 3:33 a.m., Jason began the chant. The ancient words felt alien on his tongue, a low guttural vibration that filled the small room. At first, nothing happened. The candle flames held steady, the air was still. A wave of disappointment washed over him. Was it all just a hoax? Then he heard it, a whisper, so soft it was almost imperceptible, like the sigh of wind through a keyhole. It seemed to come from every shadow in the room at once, a sibilant breath that called his name, Jason. The sound was almost human, but carried an ancient, chilling resonance that made the hair on his arms stand on end. His initial disappointment quickly turned to a cocktail of fear and exhilaration. He had done it. He had made contact. As Jason continued the ritual, a sudden, bone-chilling cold descended upon the room. His breath plumed in front of him in white clouds, and the candle flames, which had been so steady, began to flicker and dance wildly, as if in a gale-force wind. The shadows in the corners of the room deepened, stretching and contorting into unnatural, elongated shapes that writhed and pulsed independently of any light source. The single whisper he'd first heard was now a chorus. The voices multiplied, weaving a terrifying symphony of sound. They grew louder, no longer just whispering his name, but imitating the voices of people he knew and loved. He heard his mother's gentle voice, laced with a terrifying, mocking undertone. He heard his best friend, Mark, laughing, but the laughter was hollow and cruel. Then, the most horrifying sound of all, his own voice, speaking the chant back to him from the darkness, but distorted, filled with a deep and ancient malice. A sudden, violent knock rattled his door. Then another on the window, as if something was desperately trying to get in, or perhaps something was trying to get out. Panic seized him. This was wrong. This was all terribly, horribly wrong. He tried to stop, to break the chant, but the words kept pouring from his mouth, as if he were a puppet and some unseen force was pulling the strings. He reached to close the grimoire, but its pages were fused together, impossible to shut. The chalk and salt symbols on the floor began to glow with a sickly, crimson light, pulsing in rhythm with the frantic thumping in his chest. He was trapped. The circle wasn't for protection. It was a cage. And he wasn't the zookeeper. He was the bait. Jason realized his fatal error far too late. He had unjust performed the ritual at the wrong time. He had opened a door for something that had no intention of following any rules but its own. Legend says that anything summoned after the witching hour of 3:33 a.m. is not bound by the summoner's will. It is a free agent, a chaotic entity drawn not by the core, but by the opportunity. It arrives not to serve, but to consume. It chooses its own victim, and its hunger is endless. The glowing circle became a prison of dark energy, and the shadows were no longer just moving, they were crawling. Thin, inky tendrils slithered from the corners of the room, creeping across the floor toward him. Objects in his room began to levitate and spin violently. Books flew from the shelves. His desk chair skidded across the floor, and the silver mirror at the center of the circle cracked a spiderweb of fractures spreading across its surface. Jason screamed, a raw, primal sound of pure terror. As the shadowy tendrils reached the edge of the circle and began to seep through the glowing lines, the whispering chants grew deafening, a vortex of sound that seemed to tear at his very sanity. The last thing Jason saw was a formless darkness rising from the shattered mirror, a shape made of pure void, with an absence of light so profound it seemed to swallow the candlelight around it. Jason disappeared that night. His roommate returned the next morning to an empty, freezing cold room. The book was gone. The only evidence that anything had happened was a faint, scorched circular outline on the floorboards and a single black candle, its wax melted into the shape of a screaming face. The official report listed him as a missing person, another student who simply walked away. But those who know the old stories whisper a different truth. Some say he was dragged into that in-between world, a shadowy dimension where he is forced to replay the ritual for all eternity, a ghost in his own nightmare. Others, the ones who live near the old woods by the campus, claim they've seen a figure wandering among the trees late at night, a gaunt, pale young man, drawn to the deepest shadows, his mouth forever whispering a silent warning to anyone foolish enough to follow in his footsteps. So, if you ever find an ancient book hidden in a dusty corner, if you stumble upon a strange ritual online promising power or knowledge, or if you hear a whispered invitation carried on the dead of night's breeze, remember Jason, remember the warning written in blood-red ink. Never, under any circumstances, perform a ritual after 3:33 a.m. Curiosity is a powerful human trait. It drives us to explore, to learn, to discover. But some doors are locked for a reason. Some knowledge is forbidden because its price is not paid in gold or effort, but in sanity and souls. Because curiosity can awaken forces that have slumbered for eons. Forces that, once awakened, will never let you go. The shadows are always watching, and they are always hungry. It's too late. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy stories that lurk in the dark, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You wouldn't want to miss what we have coming for you next, before it's too late. Stay safe, and whatever you do, don't look in the mirror after the clock strikes 3.